Let me tell you, nobody moves back to Ridgefield expecting to become the town lunatic, right? But that's exactly the role I got handed. And let me tell you, it came with all the perks: ignored emails, HOA fines, and a starring role as angry man with too much time on his hands. Yeah, that happened. See, I spent 3 decades as a government geologist mapping fault lines, writing reports folks used as doorstops, and chasing earthquakes across half the state. I was ready to trade chaos for quiet, bought myself a little ranch house pressed up against Brushwood Ridge just west of town, thinking I'd finally earned some peace. Good joke, huh? What most folks never knew was that this ridge sat on one of the most temperamental fault lines in the whole county, one I'd drilled, walked, and cursed at for 30 years. I knew what it could do when people got greedy or careless, but Ridgefield was changing fast. The HOA, once a bunch of neighbors in faded t-shirts, got themselves rebranded as the Ridgefield Renewal Committee. Same folks, shinier teeth, a whole lot less sense. Their big idea: turn every wild inch of land into a luxury asset. You could practically smell the ambition in the air, somewhere between fresh paint and lemon cleaner. It started innocent enough until the morning I spotted a yellow excavator perched just past my fence bucket, dangling like a threat. Orange flags everywhere. Surveyors' clipboards, the works. A stack of blueprints on the hood of a white SUV with an HOA sticker slapped across the door. Didn't take a genius. I asked the guy in the crisp shirt what was up. New housing development. He grunted, barely looking at me. Ridgefield Heights, 13 executive homes, HOA backed. I glanced at the ridge. You do realize this is seismic ground? He snorted. Old rumors. I said, not rumors, pal. Geological fact. That got his attention for about 2 seconds until he realized he'd have to answer to the board, not to some cranky old geologist in muddy boots. So that night I dug out 30 years of data maps, overlays, seismic logs, spread them across my kitchen table until it looked like I was planning a heist. The next morning, for the first time in years, I showed up at the HOA board meeting, polished floors, faux oak table, and the unmistakable smell of self-importance. Karen Lattimore, president, with a smile brittle as a cracker, greeted me like she was about to call security. Public comments at the end, she tried. Nope, I said. You're building on an active fault. That's not just dumb, it's dangerous. Room got real quiet. Then the chuckles started dismissive, smug. Karen silenced them, said we had the land reviewed. It passed inspection. A basic soil test isn't a seismic survey, I said, and slapped down my maps in a USB drive with 18 years of GPS readings. She didn't even glance at them. We appreciate your concern, she said, like I was warning her about the weather. If you want to escalate this talk to the city? I said I would. She banged her gavel, warned me about community interference, and that was that. But I wasn't about to let it go. Next week, every mailbox in town had a glossy brochure, Ridgefield Heights, Elevate Your Life. Artists' renderings of mansions with glass walls, infinity pools, porches, catching the sunset. The names were ridiculous. The Aspen, the Marigold, the Summit. Each one perched right on top of the very fault line I'd spent decades cursing. The kicker, Karen's photo on the back arms, crossed like she'd invented the place. We believe in building a legacy. I nearly choked. Showed the brochure to my neighbor Daryl, a retired firefighter with a sixth sense for disasters. Looks like a damn resort, he grumbled. It's a death trap, I said. He just nodded like he'd seen plenty of fools gamble with fire and lose. You warned them. I'm not done warning. I spent 6 hours at the county records office tracing permits, applications, overlays. Found the smoking gun 3 months earlier. The HOA had reclassified the ridge from conditional to permitted residential, filed under no known environmental hazards. No mention of the fault. Not a word. I mailed copies of everything, maps, reports, the whole paper trail to the city planning department, certified mail. 2 weeks, no answer. Meanwhile, bulldozers started clearing the slopes I used to hike with my wife. I watched as they hammered stakes into land that had once cracked concrete 15 miles away. They even threw a champagne-soaked launch event ribbon-cutting drone footage, the mayor grinning for the camera. I watched online, Karen's voice booming from the stage. "We are elevating our community." Investors in suits nodded like bobbleheads. I felt sick. Drove straight to City Hall, demanded to see someone, got a rushed meeting with Elise Morales, planning coordinator. Dropped my binder on her desk. "This doesn't match the HOA's report," she said, frowning. "Their geotechnical survey didn't find a fault." "Because they did a generic soil test, not a seismic one," I said. "This is a known fault, documented in 2004. I was there. I'll bring this to the director," she promised. "Do it fast," I said. "Because when that ground gives, people will die." She promised to follow up. Back home, the construction kept rolling, concrete poured, frames up, banners flapping. From my porch, I watched the marigold rise right on top of the most active part of the fault. My patience wore thinner than the drywall they were hanging. Finally, Elise called back, voice tight. "Your data's compelling," she said, "but the permits are approved, construction's legal, and unless there's proof of fraud, the city can't intervene." "You're holding it," I snapped. "We defer to the HOA's contractors for environmental clearance," she replied, sounding exhausted. That's when I realized the HOA wasn't just building houses. They'd built a wall of bureaucracy so thick no truth could get through. So I changed tactics. Wrote an op-ed for the local paper, "Fault Lines and False Promises, Ridgefield Heights is a disaster waiting to happen." Published with maps, photos, quotes from federal reports. By lunch, the HOA served me a cease and desist delivered by Todd, their vice president of compliance, looking like he'd rather be golfing. "Legal notice," he said, like it was a Christmas card. "You're in violation of public conduct clauses." I laughed, read it in front of him. "You understand this isn't enforceable, right? I'm just the messenger." He shrugged. "Tell Karen the earth doesn't care about her lawyers," I said. They locked me out of the next meeting, posted security guards, threatened fines. I handed out flyers in the parking lot. "When Ridgefield Heights collapses, will your family be next?" They fined me $500 for fear-mongering. I framed it. Then I set up a booth at the farmer's market. Ridgefield Earthwatch showed maps, drone footage, time-lapse of tremors. Neighbors stopped, asked questions, some signed a petition. Word spread. A few brave souls thanked me at the grocery store. Others whispered about new cracks on Maple Hollow Drive. I checked it myself, fresh fissures forming near the new sidewalk. Small, almost invisible, but I knew what they meant. The ground was moving. The first time I watched the earth split, I lost my sister. That memory came back like a gut punch, her smile, her house swallowed by a hillside. That's why I couldn't stop. I'd failed once. Never again. The next morning, Darryl brought coffee. "You okay?" he asked. "Just remembered some things I said." He handed me the local paper petition, front page, 600 signatures. The city finally responded. They'd re-review the HOA's soil studies. Not the seismic survey I wanted, but a crack in the armor. Karen fired back with more threats, accused me of spreading panic, promised property liens. I posted their letter online. That's when the support started coming from a retired engineer, from a woman named Riley Park, who'd been in my sister's class. "If you need expert review, I'm here," she wrote. I sat there with tears in my eyes, feeling something shift, grief becoming resolve. The city's engineering division launched a review. The HOA doubled down, hosted open houses, bought billboards live on the edge. I stared at one so long I missed a green light. Live on the edge, if only they knew. A new crew arrived, installing fancy seismic damping gadgets like that could outsmart a fault line. I couldn't stop them. The city moved slow. Karen and the board moved like a storm was on their heels. One morning I approached her with buyers in tow. "Do you know what's under these homes?" I asked the couple. Karen tried to brush it off. He's exaggerating, but the seed was planted. After that, I started mailing out anonymous packets, maps, photos, data. 2 buyers pulled deposits, a contractor bailed a real estate firm, dropped Ridgefield Heights from their website. The ridge started to hum. Micro tremors, dozens a day. My old monitors picked up the rhythm, a dangerous spike. The fuse was burning. So I called in a favor from Ed Ramos at the USGS. Within days, a team arrived, set up equipment, started readings. Karen tried to block them. Too late. Emergency powers. The data didn't lie, the ridge was waking up. USGS issued a provisional alert warning against construction. Karen called it hysteria. She planned a grand reveal anyway, open bar, press music. I watched from the trees as the crowd gathered, Karen on stage, all white blazer and big promises. The ground gave its first warning at 10:16 a.m. A low vibration, birds scattering, dogs barking. Then a thud, the stage swaying. Karen forced a laugh. Probably just a truck. 2 minutes later, the earth hit with everything it had. Pavement buckled, walls cracked. The Marigold's foundation split glass, showering the hillside. The house groaned, half-collapsed dust rising like judgment. People ran, screamed, sirens everywhere. This was preventable. I filmed everything, cracked streets, the chaos, the dust. The city declared an emergency. News helicopters circled. Karen, dirt-streaked, stood in front of the wreckage on live TV. We had every reason to believe the land was stable. Unforeseen, she said. I lined up every warning, every violation, every letter and report, sent them to the press. They knew. They were warned. They built anyway. The story blew up statewide headlines, viral footage, class action lawsuits, resignations. The board collapsed. Permits were frozen. Karen stepped down, her ambition left in ruins, yellow tape flapping in the wind. Neighbors who'd once avoided me now thanked me, sometimes with tears, sometimes with casseroles. The mayor called me in not as a nuisance but as a consultant. They started an oversight committee. Schools hosted earthquake drills, local businesses donated retrofitting supplies. The healing was slow but real. The old HOA was gone. A new board led by Linda Ramirez, just a nurse with a good heart, stood up and said, "We failed. We forgot safety comes before beauty." And for the first time, I believed them. They asked me to help advise, to train others. Riley Park, now a civil engineer, took the environmental seat, a new voice, grounded and brave. We planted trees on the ridge, built a bench overlooking the ruins. Someone carved "The Earth Speaks." Listen. Kids left drawings on the fence. The marigold stood as a lesson, ambition without caution. You know, I used to think I'd never feel peace here again. But one morning, walking the trail with Daryl, coffee in hand, he asked if I'd ever leave. I looked out across the valley, scarred but softer now, and said, "Didn't fight to save this place, just to walk away." Sun broke through, warm and gentle, and for the first time in years, Ridgefield felt like home again. So let me ask you, when you see something wrong, do you speak or do you wait for disaster? Would you stand your ground even when it feels like shouting into a void? Or do you wait for the earth to answer for you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your stories, because one voice, one truth can shift the ground beneath even the tallest walls. And sometimes standing your ground is exactly what saves the place you call home.